Alright, let's talk about Something is Killing the Children, specifically the first volume, so the first 5 issues, which honestly might be one of the most intriguing, terrifying, and different comics I've personally read. But before that, hey, my name's Alex, and I just started reading comics about 6 to 8 months ago, so I don't know too much yet, so feel free to give any suggestions and leave a comment about what you love or hate about the series, or if you just haven't read it at all. This is one of those books that everyone around me has always recommended, and I should have listened earlier, because what James and Werther are doing here isn't just like superhero comics, but spooky. I feel like it has like a little bit of a different mindset to it. So I kind of want to break down a little bit about the setup of the story. Why does this book feel somewhat different from superhero comics? And why the horror works so well, even when you barely see the monsters. Oh, and spoiler warning for the first arc, by the way. The book starts out in Archer's Peak, a small town that's already kind of deep into a nightmare when we arrive. There are kids missing that have never been found, and the ones that are found are brutally murdered. And no one has a real explanation. One thing I really appreciate about this story is it doesn't waste time pretending that everything is all right. There's no parents and adults acting like, hey, it's all cool. Children are disappearing. There's no prolonged phase with characters thinking, oh, it's just an animal. The town is in a state of panic and the parents are desperate. Throughout the book, there's a persistent sense that everyone feels that it may be too late to fix this situation. And I think one of the smartest choices that this book makes is the focus on the kids and not the monster itself right away. James is one of the children that survives the first attack that we see in Archer's Peak. And right away, we learn a really big rule of this world is only children can see the monsters. That's it. That's the big rule. And it's kind of scary because it explains instantly why adults are kind of useless in this. You can't just go to your parent and tell them exactly what you're thinking. And it's not because they're bad people, but because they literally can't see the threat. So to them, it just looks like the kids are disappearing and saying crazy things, which is way scarier than if everyone knew what was going on. Then Erica Slaughter shows up and she does not arrive like a superhero, more like a mercenary. I kind of like how they frame Erica. She's not really like your friend when she shows up. If it was a superhero comic, Erica would be framed as kind of a cool, mysterious savior, but this book doesn't do that at all, really. I feel like it has her as kind of a creepy, kind of off-putting person that you kind of just hope is the answer to what the town needs. She's blunt, emotionally distant, and can be kind of unsettling. There's a moment early on where she basically tells James, like, yeah, the other kids are dead. There's no comforting lie. There's no, I'll save them. Just kind of the truth. Superhero stories usually show up before things get bad. The superhero swoops in, people get saved, and the city survives. And Something is Killing the Children, the hero shows up after the damage is done. Erica isn't really here to save everyone. She's here to stop things from getting worse, I feel like. And then even then, kind of barely. I like that she uses odd makeshift weapons, kind of makes her feel less like a hero. Like in issue 4, they go to a House Depot to pick up shears, machetes, chainsaws without safety precautions, making her feel kind of like a gun for hire kind of thing, or almost not that of like a professional hero. But by issue 5, we also learn that she's part of a larger organization called the House of Slaughter. And instead of making things feel safer, that reveal kind of makes me feel like the world is even darker. Because if there's a whole system built around this, that means this is happening for a long time and all over the place. I also want to talk about the monsters and kind of like the lack of monsters. You almost never get a full clean look at them in the first 5 issues. They're always kind of like half hidden, covered in a shadow, or cut off by a panel. And I feel like it's probably very deliberate, being that horror is kind of hard to show in this kind of medium. And I feel like it separates it from superhero comics where they kind of love the clarity of things. You're supposed to recognize who the villain is instantly. The clear design, bold shapes, and marketable looks. I feel like horror doesn't do that. These monsters are scary because they feel incomplete. Your brain is filling in the worst possible version of them, and because only the children can see them, every scene where the adults show up, it just adds tension. The cops think the kids are kind of lying or just stressed. Parents think it's trauma and imagination, and the town kind of starts turning inward instead of outward. I feel like that's really where the real horror kind of lives out. The monster isn't just a creature, it's the fact that no one with power can actually acknowledge it. So it feels like the kids are kind of on their own. I also like that the adults aren't really the villains. A weaker version of the story might portray the adults as like abusive or evil. However, this book kind of takes a different approach. The parents and the police officers are mostly depicted as exhausted, grieving, and desperate for rational answers. This makes the situation even scarier. The horror doesn't stem from cruelty, it arises from limitations. While adults have power, they lack access to the truth, leaving the kids feeling completely isolated in the worst possible way. This creates a very different kind of horror than what we see with evil authority figures. I really appreciate the moments when James is talking to the principal, and you can see how deeply affected the adults are by the deaths and missing children. Their hurt and confusion are so evident that they can no longer hide their emotions or put on a front for the kids. Also, I want to take a moment to talk about Werther's art. Combined with the coloring, it sets like a specific mood for the book. It kind of characterizes the books with the muted blues and the sickly yellows and the heavy blacks. Nothing feels really warm. Even in the daytime scenes, it seems like the sun isn't performing its role. And when the blood shows up, it pops. But in a you weren't ready for that way, superhero comics kind of do the opposite. They use bright colors to energize the books. The way this book uses drained colors, I feel like is the perfect way to show horror in this medium. Now, one of my last points I wanted to talk about is why this doesn't feel like a superhero comic. And even though technically it has a monster hunter protagonist, a few big reasons for me is I feel like there's no power fantasy. You don't read this book and think, I wish I was Erica. You kind of wish, I hope I never live in this world kind of thing because of the horrors that they deal with. Two, my second point is the violence actually kind of matters. In superhero comics, people die and then come back all the time. But I feel like in this book, people die, it's permanent. Trauma doesn't turn into motivation. It just scars people. Even when Erica succeeds, it never feels like a true triumph. The monsters are defeated, but there are kids still dead. The trauma lingers, and another town is likely next. The book doesn't provide us with a satisfying superhero moment of the problem is solved. Every victory feels like extinguishing a fire in one room of a house that is already engulfed in flames. And for my third point, I feel like a great horror move for this book, it doesn't explain everything. We receive some hints, including like the House of Slaughter, the rules that Erica follows, and the concept that monsters do exist. However, there's no lengthy exposition, no training montage, and no explanatory speech about how the world functions. I feel like superhero comics often take that time to explain their system, while horror thrives on the unknown. This book asks the reader to embrace that discomfort rather than hastily providing answers. The first 5 issues of Something is Killing the Children don't just set up a horror series. I feel like they tell a complete and emotional story about fear and disbelief and survival. It's a horror that doesn't rely on jump scares or gore. It relies on not being believed, being too young to be taken seriously, and realizing that growing up doesn't mean understanding the world, it means forgetting the worst parts of it. I feel like that's the reason why the book sticks with people. At least that's why it sticks with me. Because when the first 5 issues end, the monster is gone, but that doesn't mean it's all of them. The world that allowed it to exist is still here. And I feel like that's scarier than any other creature design, because we just know that another town is next, and that the story will probably never end. Anyways, that's the video. I really appreciate you guys watching. I really wanted to talk about this comic. I finally finished the first volume. I read the first issue a while back when I first got the book, and finally just sat down and read it. I know it's not really superhero stuff, but I really wanted to talk about this book. I absolutely love it. I'm going to get volume 2 probably tomorrow. So yeah, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace. Oh, like and sub.